Okay. And I want to thank everyone who is attending this evening and the Toledo League of Women Voters and other people that I see. And I see a lot of people that I know who are on Zoom. And if I mention one of you, I have to remember to mention all of you. So you know who you are, that I know you very well for years. And my a lot of resources who've helped me, because there's a lot of experts in Toledo who I needed to tap into to ask questions about Toledo education, our district. So here we are again. And when I was invited, they said, well, talk about education. I go, oh, Lord, I've been trying to narrow this down for about a month. And so I'll give it my best shot. I want to thank those who are on the Zoom and those who are here who are serving on a public school board. And I encourage a lot of people to decide to think about serving on a public school board, because right now there's a concerted effort in the nation to really go after the school boards and take them over. And these are the folks that don't appreciate and support public education. So I just want to give that little pitch. You know, there are nearly 1.6 million children in public schools in Ohio. And, you know, we've been waiting 25 years for a constitutional school funding formula. I left the classroom 23 years ago. As a fourth grade teacher, I saw firsthand in my classroom the lack of resources and support that I needed, especially since we were starting the new testing system, because the Republicans didn't want to fund public schools constitutionally unless everyone was held accountable, and they were saying there was a lot of waste in bureaucracy in the public schools. So then we went down this testing path, and it seemed as though they just kept using the test results to punish the public schools who didn't get the resources, who needed the resources, and knew it was unconstitutional as far as the resources coming directly to our school districts, especially the urban centers. So lo and behold, I'm still on this track to make the state of Ohio leadership constitutionally fund our schools. We do have a fair school funding law that was put together from the local advocates, superintendents, advocates, parents, teachers, everyone, to solve the problem, because, hey, they knew it wasn't going to happen with the leadership. In the meantime, the legislators thought we need to try something new. Sally Pers, remember Sally Pers? She initiated the pilot project in Lucas County for charter schools. And they were going to have a 5-year review to see if it would work or what's working, because they were going to release the rules and regulations for the charter schools, because they thought it was too bureaucratic and that we needed to reform public education. Well, the 5-year review never happened. A lot of corruption happened in that 5 years. A lot of people who actually knew how to access, you know, the money and the power, and started up a charter school without having any business and knowledge for starting up a charter school. So we've been on this road for almost 30 years now. And what they've put together with the charter school system isn't working. And I'll go further into that and explain why charter schools are not public schools. And you're going to hear that all the time, but they are not public schools. You know, there are many moving parts to address Ohio's education system to meet the needs of the modern education that you need for the workforce. You know, every 5 years, it seems people are, you know, getting retrained. There's new jobs, new technology, and our education system must meet that need for modern society. And I believe it takes everyone engaging and keeping us, specifically, especially our children, moving to that better future. And I believe Ohio can get this right, but you need the right leaders to get it right. Now, some of the challenges I'm going to be talking about is something I already mentioned, the fair school funding. the constitutional obligation for traditional public schools, the common set of schools that need 100%, that are 100% accountable to Ohio tax dollars. Now, supporting local school boards is our #1 obligation, especially at the state school board where I serve right now. And we have such a diverse state that we need to reflect our outcomes on the report cards to address the local geographic area. Some of their strengths need to be on that report card. In the last General Assembly, I was able to address the report card reform because we found out that there were many flawed formulas in there that were setting schools up to look like they're failing and they're not. And the academic distress, Senate Bill 70 that Kasich put into place, we captured a couple schools, Lorraine and East Cleveland, where they shouldn't have been captured into academic distress. Their local school board was shut down and a CEO was put in place to make everything work. Well, we finally got rid of that last General Assembly, so that didn't work. The other area that I really feel we need to address right now is our teacher shortage. And if anyone's been paying attention, you may have friends that are no longer teaching. And as you know, we have an aging workforce. You know, it's time to retire. And a lot of our young people are leaving Ohio. So the brain drain is finally caught up with us. We have teachers in need of support in that classroom right now. We need more resources and training and better salaries. And I think because what we went through with COVID, a lot of the teachers are burned out or they're not going back, or it's just not working with them if they have young children because we have a child care issue in Ohio as well. So we need to support them and we need to support the students with more resources. You know, Ohio is addressing that issue. I've heard a lot of good, I think, implementation programs at the state. I listened to the state superintendent give her testimony today for the budget in the House. And we're working with teacher preparation programs to meet the pipeline needs. We're doing a grow your own program. We're doing more with students in schools to encourage them to become teachers because their teacher mentors are right there. And there are very few schools that are really tapping into that. So we want to encourage and do more. We're also working with veterans. I'm a veteran myself. I don't believe we should just have veterans go into a classroom without any preparation for teaching. There is a bill in the Senate that would allow anybody to teach if they were a veteran. And so that is an insult to this profession, and we cannot stand for that. And I also want to remind everybody that we have allowed 18-year-olds to be substitute teachers in the state of Ohio. So I want you to think about that. In high school, they might be in a science class. So they took that measure because we have that shortage of teachers. We don't want that to remain. I don't want that to remain. We need to do a professional job of training teachers so that our children can get the best. We're also recruiting retired teachers, and I've run into retired teachers who are saying they keep increasing the salary they want to give me. I think I'm going to hold off a little bit longer. You know, so they're going after the teachers that are retired if they would like to go back into the classroom, but also people who let their licenses expire. So we're going to try to make that easier. The one area that I've been working on for the last 4 years is to increase computer science teachers. We have a woeful lack of computer science teachers, and we're just getting started with that. So I think that's a promising area. Now, also challenges ahead. This is testimony this week from the Director of Ohio Office of Budget and Management. She stated the Annie E. Casey Foundation metrics ranks Ohio the 31st for overall child well-being. And I think that is something that should absolutely direct us, and we should find out locally where we are and what we can do to support our school districts and all the agencies that work with our students. I do know that Toledo ranked the highest in the state for our children being homeless. So I saw an article in the Blade on the initiative that Nick Comize put in place to help people to stay in their homes and have assistance with that. So that is something that we as a community can really try to see if we can make a difference in that area. 28% are not demonstrating, our children are not demonstrating being ready for kindergarten. It's really a stark statistic. 13% are diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Now, the governor did propose a department agency that I support because I see he's putting a lot of the agencies together that worked in silos. You know, the mental health, the foster care system, education. Well, this is going to allow the Department of Children and Youth to address those issues like increasing childcare, increasing preschool, mental health, health care, and foster care reform, which is one of my greatest concerns. We now have foster care youth who went through the system as part of an advisory group with the Health and Human Services. And I'm working closely with them as a state school board member because they immediately got hold of me because I've been working with them. And they're telling me where the challenges and gaps and barriers are because they're not represented in our school districts. So, you know, foster care system is also like the #1 target for traffickers. And so we need to really address this issue. And I want to remind everyone that the state of Ohio, at this point, if you're in the foster care system, is the parent. So we should make the state of Ohio do a much better job and hold them accountable. But there's a real need in that area. So I believe it's time for Ohio to expand its education system to also include universal preschool. Like other states have, for example, Georgia did it years ago. It's a constitutional amendment. The voters approved it. And they kept approving it as they improved their system and needed to go back to the voters. That included revenues. So their academic results show that universal preschool program did work. And another historical fact that I've learned, and this is from Bill Phillips, if you know Bill Phillips from Education Adequacy Group, who's also heading up Vouchers Hurt Ohio with a lawsuit. He said 100 years ago, huge debate on whether we're going to increase the graduation rate from 8th grade to 12th grade. And Ohio almost didn't do that 100 years ago. So in my opinion, we need to go on the other end of the scale and go get those preschoolers, even 3 to 4 year olds, and help us get them prepared and ready for school, because that's what the modern society would do. And it did 100 years ago. So I really feel that we need to pass a constitutional resolution to get that done. And for 2 general assemblies, I had the concurrent resolution for the legislature to approve that with some parameters, put it out to the voters to be approved, but I never had a second hearing. But it's a good idea. So we're going to keep working on that, right? You know, other concerns that I have are the measured attacks that I've seen in the last few years for public education. That is the critical race theory movement that's going across the nation. And by the way, critical race theory is not taught in the K-12 system, and there's a lot of tactics that are being used to cause chaos in the classroom and in school districts, school boards. But basically, that legislation says that we cannot teach the truth. For example, about slavery, other issues, World War II. If it makes a child feel bad, we shouldn't be teaching it. So that's a whole nother area that we need to be very cognizant of and really push back. The other area is the state board recently rescinded the anti-racism resolution that they passed. So they passed a resolution saying we're against racism. And then some school board members said that we're going to rescind that. The same idea of critical race theory. Some people cannot feel bad. I'm making this very simple because I have a lot more to go through. Also, passing the resolution to discriminate against LGBTQ students. We have Senate Bill 1 and Senate Bill 11 that I'm going to go through right now. Senate Bill 11 is the backpack bill. If you heard that the last couple of years, it's a universal voucher, what I call coupon system expansion. Educational choice private school voucher expansion, which will give $5,500 for grades K-8 or $7,500 to high schoolers to attend private schools, and homeschoolers a non-refundable state tax credit of a maximum of $2,000, which is now $250. Now, what's happening with the state budget and these other two systems, the charter school system and the voucher system, is that the state is now funding for the first time a direct state tax dollars to them. It's not going through the traditional public school system. So
did that start already?
It starts this budget. And, you know, remember I talked about the legislators not wanting to increase school funding and fix school funding because they wanted to hold people accountable. And then they set up the charter school system, and which didn't have any accountability, and it just started. There was very poorly written. And they were saying that children need a choice to escape from the failing schools, which is the report card and accounting and testing wasn't done right. So now it's just a universal voucher for private, for-profit and religious institutions. So the veil has come off. The pretense is gone that we need to help our families escape from failing public schools. We need to help struggling financially, the struggling families financially in poor performing public school districts. So it's been a scam and a sham for 30 years. So now we need to really be upset about this because it's just out loud now, public dollars being utilized for private education. It would also eliminate the income and geographic restrictions on who would get school vouchers or coupon. Please use the word coupon. People understand that better. Sometimes the coupon doesn't cover all the tuition. How much is this going to cost? So that's the big issue right now. We did have some indication in the last budget with the previous backpack bill. It stated that it would cost Ohio taxpayers between 150 million and nearly 1 billion in the first year. Most Ohio taxpayers do not want our public schools to continue to suffer as money and resources are siphoned away from us to prop up the private for-profit and religious interests. Ohio is now facing a lawsuit by a group called Vouchers Hurt Ohio, and I encourage you to go to the website, talk to your school board members to see if they're going to join that lawsuit. There are 614 school districts, might be 612, but we have about almost 200 schools. And I think as this budget is being revealed and testimonies coming forward, we need to encourage our school districts to take a look at that. Sure. Well, right now, they limit income in geographic areas to get a voucher. Okay, to get a voucher. right now in law. They're changing it so that it will be a universal voucher for anyone. There's no income requirement or geographic restriction. So it can happen in Bellevue, Ohio. It can happen in areas that never had to deal with their school district losing money. Or because the state is directly funding, it doesn't come through the school district, but the public schools are getting less in their budgets. In fact, right now, there's no increase with the governor's budget for public schools right now, because they're paying for the for-profit, private religious schools with vouchers.
Is this a proposal or is this law?
This is in the budget right now. It's not law now. It's in the budget that the governor just introduced this week, and they started having hearings. And they have to have the budget passed by June 30th of this year. So it's going through the House right now, and it'll go to the Senate about Easter time. And then the final budget with both chambers will be agreed upon, sent to the Senate, sent to the governor by June 30th. You can just ask it.
This is saying on the subject of interest, how do we get legislators to let us vote on whether or not our school levy money is used to legalize segregation and discrimination by funding private parochial schools?
Well, I
When
think-
voted for my school levy, I don't remember that being in fine. And I don't remember any of the parochial private schools, cheerleaders and football players having car washes and helping deliver yard signs and going door to door to deliver your paperwork to help support our schools and grow our schools. I don't remember any of them helping us to get those dollars, and yet we have to hand them over.
Well, remember I said in this budget, they're going to be directly funded by the state. So it's not going to be through your budget.
But if my tax dollars go to the state,
Mhm.
we should be able to, that should be on the ballot. You know,
Yes.
if you vote for this levy, you have to understand that X percent
Mhm.
could go to fund your neighbor's decision to go to a private practice. And I believe they have the right to make that choice.
Mhm.
But I don't want my tax dollars going to places that get to legally segregate and discriminate children based on their ability, disability, race, color, creed, whatever. I don't remember that being on the ballot. And for the governor or legislators to have that liberty with my money, I don't trust them enough to make that decision.
Teresa, can you repeat that question so that our Zoom audience can hear?
Yes. Mhm.
Thank you.
How do we get legislators to let people vote on the ed choice? When we voted for our school levies, we were not told our monies would or could go toward private parochial schools and legalize segregation and discrimination. And I think you're hitting on the discrimination part that I know I've heard over and over as a legislator. They don't accept every child as a public school. They can, yes, the schools choose. And by the way, all parents choose their schools. No, you can go to a private school, public school. Doesn't have to be funded by the state tax dollars or local tax dollars. And, you know, the Vouchers Hurt Ohio is a lawsuit, but I do believe we need a constitutional amendment in the state of Ohio on this question. Certainly do. Because I'm going to get into further why it's really important for people to understand why the charter schools and the voucher schools are harmful for our tax dollars. So thank you. I don't know if I answered that question, but you know, that's a lot of work because of gerrymandering, and they ignored the constitutional requirement to fund public schools. They've ignored constitutional requirement to have fair districts. They don't need to listen to the voters. And in the last lame duck, they tried to, our Secretary of State tried to change the requirement to have 60% approval on a constitutional amendment by the citizens. To me, it seems strange because to get that approved, you'd have to have 50+1. But they want to have 60% afterwards. And it's to stop the citizens from having their voice be heard in citizens' initiatives when the legislature and our elected officials statewide do not listen. But let me go on. The Ohio School Board Association is opposed to this bill, Senate Bill 11. And I'm going to read their statement because I think it's important to understand, because our local elected school boards across the state of Ohio are starting to gather together and starting to support what we need to do to keep our funds public. Ohio School Board Association is opposed to this type of bill. They believe Ohio should update and fully fund fair school funding before engaging in any type of voucher expansion. Further, granting state-funded vouchers reduces the level of funding available to support and improve the public school system to meet the needs of the students that have chosen to attend their public school. 1.6 million students. Only about 10% of our students come from the choice and also charter schools. So let's keep that in mind. The other part of the voucher concern that I want to share with you. Voucher schools have very little accountability to taxpayers. Voucher schools choose their students. They choose their students. And even the ones they chose, sometimes they get counseled out because they don't quite fit. They have a hard time meeting the IEPs and getting the specialized services for students who are in need of that. But they'll take the public school dollar money until they counsel them out. Academic studies vary on Ohio's voucher system. They do not guarantee students perform better than struggling public schools. There are enough studies out there to tell the public that you just can't assume because they're private, they're better than a public school. And that seems to be the high rhetoric that is reinforced at the State House and with our Republican colleagues statewide. Taxpayer accountability, again, quality assurance and good governance structures in both the charter school system and the coupon system is very problematic as it relates to transparency. Unless a charter school is sponsored and operated by a public entity, like the University of Toledo, or a public school like Toledo Public Schools, the nonprofit and for-profit, both of them. Those entities do not have to show you 100% of your taxpayer money that they spent, like Washington local schools, like the traditional public schools with elected school board members. On the charter school system, they're not elected, they're selected, and usually by the management company that's a for-profit management company, which we can go down that road of 30 years of corruption and people actually spending jail time stealing money because we didn't have a good checks and balance and a good governance system in place. Therefore, in my book, I'm going to say it again, charter schools are not public schools. And I heard it in the testimony with the state superintendent. It wasn't her that said that, it was her chief of staff who said that. And I've heard it for 30 years. Charter schools are not public schools unless they're organized around a public entity so that they have to put all that money on the table, just like Washington local school districts do. And if something's not going right in those school systems, it's easy for the auditor to find it. And the private schools and voucher schools are not required to have an audit. They can do whatever they want with the money. There's an uneven balance when it comes to good governance principles for our tax dollars. What we've learned over 30 years is that rules and regulations, the fewer rules and regulations didn't produce a better education system at all. We've got 30 years of evidence on that. Ohio is still waiting for the $161 million from ECOT, Electronic Classroom of Tomorrow. We're still waiting for that money. We're still waiting for money from White Hat Management, who hatched their White Hat Management school on the back of a Waffle House napkin. Okay. Some of these fellows that started out in Ohio, who became millionaires, they just cooked up the idea and they had the influence with the powers that be, and they got it. So our first obligation is Ohio's Constitution, and that is the traditional public school system. But now we have two more, the charter school system and now the voucher system. So Vouchers for Ohio is the program where we can do something about this. And I encourage you to learn more about it. I'm sure my friend Bill Phillips would come and present with his team, as he would like to come all over the state of Ohio and educate further on what we need to do.
Will they be doing a petition thing? Is it gonna
Well,
be
they're
ballot
doing a
petition?
lawsuit.
So if it
It's
doesn't-
not a petition.
Okay.
But in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with getting one started. And I think that that kind of threat will impact the decisions made with this budget that we have to get done by June 30th. Bill Phillips is the executive director for adequacy in education. That was the original DeRoff case. I think I got the title of his organization wrong, but he's also heading up the Vouchers Hurt Ohio effort to sue the state of Ohio on their voucher system. Okay. So. Yes, now's a great time. I think attend the school board meetings, because the people who want to destroy our public schools are attending the school board meetings and causing chaos. Moms for Liberty, check out that website. You know, they come in from all over to a school district that they're attacking, and you know, there's all kinds of strange things happening, but also help them with their levies. Volunteer at the school, know what's going on. You know, where we're not looking from the outside, we're all part of what we're trying to do to engage our students to have a better future and really support our school districts more than we ever have. So it can be anything. But I do think that that will show the school board members who work so hard. I've always said the hardest elected job in America is a school board member. And now look at me. I'm a state school board member. Never imagined that that would fit into my world, but I'm very passionate. And I left that classroom so that so teachers like me didn't have to get a second job, you know, to pay for the supplies you didn't get because they didn't fund you. And I was a non-traditional teacher coming from the Air Force and another profession and going into teaching. So I was shocked when I first started teaching and went to a lot of different school systems, and they were all different. And some of them were like Little House on the Prairie, and others were not. And others had many resources and training and support from the community for their children, and others did not. And my firm belief, deeply held belief, is that we must make every public school work for every neighborhood. Now that's not happening. And one of the reasons it's not happening is because Republicans set up a charter school system to extract money away from the districts. They set up a pilot, originally a pilot for a voucher system. resources away from the public school system, and they've abandoned those neighborhoods that need us the most. And we need to care about those children who need us the most, like in East Toledo. So North Toledo, why aren't those public schools working? Well, it might be that the education system didn't work for their parents, because it's been a while since we've had unconstitutional funding in the state of Ohio. It all plays in. And so, those kinds of elements impact that public school. And teachers do not accept that it is their fault that the student couldn't pass the test, because we take every student that comes through our door. And so those teachers need the most support. And so we need to turn this around and think about it in the right way.
How widespread at the State House is the idea that public school is socialism?
I do not know. I mean, the question was, how widespread is the thought that public schools are socialism? I haven't heard that.
And
Personally?
there's been one or two
Mhm.
reps that have specifically said that, and I didn't know whether they were just like crazy outliers or if there truly is a sense that this program like Medicare or Social Security is socialism and that they need to strike it down in order to privatize it.
Well, we know that public education is a $500 billion business in America. So these privateers, folks who want to privatize public education and other public institutions like our prisons, they don't have to show us how they spend those pennies, yet they get them, and they're not held accountable, and we have scandals. So the citizens of this nation and our community need to decide, are you going to have good governance principles in place? And this idea that they can name call and put fear people into them, keeps people like on state school boards concerned. We've had principals, superintendents who had to quit and leave because they were attacked by people because they didn't support public education, or they just went off into a political rhetoric that is not healthy, is not helpful, and it is dangerous for some of these families. So I really think that your support and whatever you can do for your local public school, and encourage people to run for public school district positions and support levies and get behind that. It's time for America to show their support for public education, because it is the thread that holds democracy together. And what we're seeing from the state level, all the way down to the local level, the national level. I mean, I just heard a bill today on a local TV that there is a bill in Washington, D.C. to pay teachers the minimal salary of $60,000. Why not? We're educating our future. And they want our children to meet the work world needs. And they're talking about these high-end jobs, yet they're paying their teachers maybe $30,000. And our people who are professionals who can help become teachers and help our students, they're going to leave a six-figure job to go to a whatever figure job. So, we need to adjust this. And the public needs to understand how important public education is, and that these other systems are a deflection off to what their responsibility is to fund public schools constitutionally. And
Does the state education controlling this or changing results?
the question is, does the State Board of Education have any control on the problems we're facing and any solutions, right? The answer to that is yes. except that you have members on that board who are appointed or some elected that do things like discriminate against our LGBTQ, rescind the resolution on racism. So those are real problems. And they were appointed by the governor. They're part of the whole Republican Party. In my next bill I was going to talk about, which has everything to do with the state school board, is Senate Bill 1, which was Senate Bill 187 in lame duck, where the governor is seizing control and power against the Constitution that Ohio voted in 1953 to separate the State Board of Education away from the governor in 1953 because they weren't getting anything done. It was so political and they weren't really getting to the root of the problems and solving anything. And so now the governor, along with the legislators who support Senate Bill 1, want to dramatically change the duties of the State Board of Education and create a Department of Education and Workforce Development and make it a department under the governor's cabinet. Now, I can support that, but I'm not going to support giving up our duties as the State Board of Education constitutionally. And the other issue that I have again is transparency. Right now, when you go to state school board, you can watch it live or you can look it up on your computer and listen to it later. None of that's going to be done in that bill. It will go into a black hole never to be seen again and no recourse for public to have access to decisions that they're making. So you can influence that. Senate Bill 1. So it reduces the duties of the State Board of Education to appointments. That means we hire the state superintendent, licensure issues for teachers and other education employees, also employee conduct and territorial transfers. That's it. So all the work that was done through committees and our statutory authority and responsibilities that have been set up since 1953 would be eliminated. And I just want to share also some of the committees that we're on. I haven't served on one yet. That will happen next week. So the Licensure and Professional Supports Committee, Literacy and Learning Acceleration Committee, that works with the literacy after school program, report cards, Workforce Readiness and Career Development Committee, Budget and Legislative Committee, and the Executive Committee. And what's important, I think, with the Budget and Legislative Committee is that we take the board proposed their budget and approved it back in September of last year for the governor to use as part of his budget that he just unveiled. And so the read and temperature of the State Board of Education takes in all the information from the local 614 school districts and what's going on. The implementation of the laws that come from the legislature signed by the governor has to be implemented at the State Board of Education. And a lot of times there's not a lot of interpretation on their laws. They make it very vague on purpose, right? They should probably be more specific. But I know legislators, they don't want to do that. They want the experts to figure it out. If something needs to be changed, and they can recommend the legislature change it. So there's a back and forth, but the State Board of Education is like the fourth arm of our government. And in 1953, there was a reason why Ohio voters voted in our Constitution to remove the superintendent away from the governor, because it wasn't working for us. So, hey, if he wants to have the state superintendent go to his new department, fine, he can go. But he can go there as an advisory, and then he can come back and we can do our work. The third grade reading guarantee is another example of what the board did in a very positive way. The third grade reading guarantee was a John Kasich initiative to help our third graders make sure they're reading by third grade. Well, and if they didn't, they had to be held back Well, research tells us that wasn't a good idea. And by the way, parents had no input on someone retaining their student. Even though they're supposed to be all about the parents. Parent had no input. So the State Board of Education did the research, made the recommendation, passed the resolution for the legislature to remove the retention element for third grade reading guarantee. And we had a bill. It didn't pass during lame duck because there's some other people, advocates, who want that done, even though we know it's harmful for them. It's harmful for students to be pulled out, not go along with their peers. Why don't we provide more resources for teachers to do the job teaching reading? Why don't we have more after school resources for children for after school on that issue? And why don't we have more resources in the school that the child could get help? We don't, because resources are being taken away through our charter school system and our voucher school system. Oh, question. Great. What would be the best way to make charter school funding expenditures transparent? Well, in other states, they don't allow entities to sponsor or manage a charter school without having a public entity. Because the public entity like Toledo Public Schools or Washington Local Schools, they are 100% transparent on every single penny they spend. Every single penny they get, every single penny they spend. It's transparent, held accountable, so you can't end up in jail because you stole some money, because there's no accountability in the system. So that's how you do it.
They're
And
all under an
they're all
existing-
under a public institution, because you don't fall, your tax money doesn't fall into a black hole, never to be seen again. And of course, a lot of the people who want to do things they shouldn't be doing are never going to get caught because the system isn't designed to be transparent. So the good governance principles that I came to the State House with, that's how I comb through every single entity in the state of Ohio with legislation and dealing with money. If it cannot be held 100% transparent and accountable, we shouldn't be doing it. I don't know if I answered your question, but, and I think I went through just about everything except for, there are some good things in the budget, and I know we have some questions, but there's a lot of good things in the budget to help support our schools. Although we just outlined the things that we would not like to see. And I know I'm up on my time. Any other questions? I have 1 minute, 2 minutes. Yes.
It seems like all this starts and stops from the legislature. And my question is this, since they voted for fair districts, that was pushed back due to the Republican slow walk in the district maps. Why aren't we attacking this from the fact that the current legislator that is sitting in there is actually illegitimate because they were supposed to have fair districts before the election, so that anything that comes out of that legislature is actually illegitimate and can be taken to court. Now, I know Roberts in Ruco versus Common Cause, they kind of turned a blind, the Supreme Court turned a blind eye on gerrymandering. But I think there could be a case for the fact that the Republicans slow walked their obligation and still put us into a gerrymandered situation. That any legislation that comes out of there is actually illegitimate because they failed to do their due diligence in getting fair district voting maps into the hands of the people and into the election.
Your reasoning is correct. So we have gerrymandered power, illegitimate power, ignored by the power in place, and the voters don't have any recourse. That's why we're going to have to go to citizen initiatives. And that's why our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, is trying to make it harder for citizen initiatives by passing a law that says we have to pass any citizen initiative by 60%.
Right.
Right?
And
But
maybe
it-
counts.
In 88 counties, but you only need 50 plus 1 to pass that 60%, which is ridiculous. And so they ignored the constitutional requirement to fund public schools fairly. 25 years, our teachers and schools and children have been denied a quality public education. They set up two systems, a charter school system, a voucher system, that do not have quality assurance with 100% transparency. That is not a government. That is a dictatorship.
But where's the state Democrat? Why aren't they like?
I mean, we do,
Well, I
but
mean,
there's so
are
few
there
of us.
cases
No.
Supreme Court over-
Well, we now have a majority of the Supreme Court being Republican. So, I mean, the only way we can get ourselves out is to educate and advocate young voters, everyone, pay attention, get involved, engage with your public schools, start there. Because we want our children to have the best, and they're not getting the best unless you live in the right zip code, like Ottawa Hills, right? So we have to ignite this through education and advocacy. I can feel my hook over here. She's coming up closer. I can feel-
Want to make a quick announcement. If you are not already signed into the website, please sign in. If you can't figure it out, Jane Seeley would be happy to help you with that. Secondly, if you came in late, please sign in to the sign-in sheet. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Teresa Fedor. I have this. Let's lift it up. What a wonderful presentation. I have a little gift for you and an application to join the League of Women Voters. Would love to have you take names.